Alright, so I've added this video to the week called Advanced Functions and Scenarios. Now again, this is not part of the course. It is not going to be, you're not going to be tested on this. I would only recommend that you go and review this video if you are looking for further information on how to do complex if statements. In other words, an if statement that tests for more than one situation. So I wanted to put this in. I don't want it in part of the regular course, simply because I don't want to, if it's, for some people this may be overwhelming and they don't want to do this, but there are going to be some of you that are interested in how you can do some of the more complicated things within Excel. Okay, so if you are going to proceed with this, please download the file Complex If Statements from Fanshawe Online and move on from here. All right, so we're going to start with a very simple if statement. So all we're doing here is we're calculating a bonus. So if the bonus is 3 or higher, they're going to get 20%, otherwise they're going to get a 10%. So this is a straightforward simple if statement. I'm going to go into the cell, I'm going to go to formulas, I'm going to go to logical and if. And remember that an if statement is made up of a logical test. The logical test itself is made up of the cell that you're testing, what you're testing it against, separated by a comparison operator. So plus or greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to or not equal to. And then if the value, if the logical test evaluates to true, then whatever is in the value if true box will display in the cell that the function is into. Otherwise, it will display whatever is false. It'll display whatever is in the false box. So in this case, we're going to be testing to see if the rating is greater than or equal to 3. Now in this particular case, that's true, but if I went down to the next row where the rating is a 1, it would be false. So if that is true, then they are going to get, I think I said a 20% rating, or 20% raise. Otherwise, they're going to get a 10% raise, or bonus. Okay, so there's my logical test. Logical test is made up of the cell I'm testing, my comparison operator, in this case greater than or equal to 3, and the value that I'm testing it against. When I click OK, I get 20% that shows in that cell. If I double click on the fill handle, it'll carry it down, so you can see that this person gets 10, this person gets 20, this person has a rating of 2, so they only get a 10%, and so on. Okay, so that's a straightforward simple if statement. It has basically one logical test. However, there are times when you need to test for two things, so or two or more. So if I look at the next option, what we want to do is we want to say if their rating is greater than or equal to a 4, they're going to get a 25% bonus. If their rating is a 3, they're going to get 15%. And if it's less than 3, they're going to get 5%. So I can no longer use the simple if statement because I have basically 3 options here, and the if statement only allows me to have 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to, basically what you need to do if you're doing this is you work your way down a hierarchy. So I'm going to test to see if the bonus is a 4 or higher, they're going to get the 25%, and we're done. So that would be the value if true, would be 25%. However, if it's not a 4 or higher, in other words, it is a 3, a 2, a 1, or a 0, then what they're going to get is, then I'm going to test it again to see, well, if it is a 3, then I'm going to give them 15%, and if it's not a 3, I'm going to give them what did I say, 5%. All right. So in effect, what we're going to do is we're going to put an if statement inside an if statement. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to click here, I'm going to go to logical, I'm going to go to if, and I'm going to do my very first test. So I'm going to say if this is greater than or equal to 4, and if that's true, they're going to get a 25% bonus. So far so good. However, if it's not greater than or equal to 4, in other words it's 3, 2, 1, or 0, I'm going to have to test a second time. So now I'm going to actually put an if statement. So I'm going to say if, bracket, D4 or D2 is equal to 3, and if that's true, they're going to get a 15% bonus. If it's not true, in other words, if it is a a 2, a 1, or a 0, they're going to get a 5% bonus. And I have to close my bracket to make it work. Okay, so in effect what I have done is I have put an if statement as an argument inside an if statement, and that's perfectly legal. Nested if statements can become complicated. You can go down 13 levels in nested if statements. So I could have, in this case, instead of having 5%, I could have had another if statement here. If I wanted to say, if it was, if it was a 2, they're going to get a 2.5% bonus. If it's a 1, they're going to get a 1% bonus. If it's a 0, I could have a whole number of different if statements in here. But just to give you the information is how it works. So what you're doing with a nested if statement is you are testing on a hierarchical, so in order. So I'm going to test for a 4 first. If it's a 4 or higher, they're going to get the 25%, and we're done. At that point in time, it would display the 25% as it's going to do in this case, because this particular one is a 4. And then it's done and it's finished. However, if it's not a 4, like in the next one where it's a 1, it's going to say, well, it's not a 4, so now I have to go down to the value of false. And the value of false is another if statement, which is basically saying, all right, well, is it a 3? And if it's not a 3, if it is a 3, it'll just put out 15% and then it's done. And if it's not a 3, it'll fall to the false, which is going to display the 5%. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to format that as a percentage. And then I'm going to copy it down. So you can see that this particular one is saying it's a 1. So let's look at the function. So it's saying if D3 is greater than or equal to 4, is it? No, it's false. So it's not going to go to value of true. It's going to go down here to value of false. And then it's going to test it again. Well, is D3 a 3? In this case, it's not. So it's going to go to value of false and it's going to put out the 5%. Okay? So that is in effect what a nested if statement does. Now I'm going to do that same nested if function using a VLOOKUP, because I find VLOOKUP a little bit more logical to work with, or a little easier to work with because it's visual. In this case, I can actually see the bonus ratings. They're over here in M1 to N4, and if they changed, if I wanted to change the percentages, I could simply go in here and change these values. If I change the range, I could go in here and change these values. Okay, so with the VLOOKUP, it's a little bit more modifiable than it is. Otherwise, if I was to try to do that with my nested if statement, I would actually have to go into the statement, change the values to whatever the new values are, and then use the fill handle to copy it down. Okay. Now, the one thing about a VLOOKUP, if you were doing an approximate search, the search values, so in this case I'm looking for a 0, a 3, or a 4, must be sorted in ascending order. Because what's going to happen here when it goes through is it's going to look for, I'm going to be looking for the rating, and I'm going to be looking for it over here in the first column. So it's going to say, is a 4 bigger than a 0? Yes, it is. So it's going to move down to the next one. Is 4 bigger than 3? Yes, it is. Is 4 bigger than 4? No, it's not. So it's going to go down and it's going to go over across and pull off the 25%. If that value over here was a 5, it would say, is 5 bigger than 0? Yes, it is. Is it bigger than 3? Yes, it is. Is it bigger than 4? Yes, it is. But since that's the last one in the range, it will still return the 25%. If it was a 0, it'd say, is 0 bigger than 0? No, and it's going to pull off the 5%. Okay, so I'm going to go here, I'm going to go to Formulas, Lookup and Reference, VLOOKUP. And again, remember what happens with the VLOOKUP. The lookup value is the piece of information that you are looking up. So in this case, it's my rating. The table array is where I'm looking it up. Okay, so again, going back to my original analogy, that's the phone book that I'm looking for. So I'm looking for it in this range. And remember, I must make that an absolute value because I don't want that range to change when I copy the formula down. So what it's doing is looking for that 4 in the first column of that table that I have. So in M, it's looking in M whatever, M2, M3, and M4. The column index is once it finds the correct value, I'm going to go and I'm going to return the value that's in column 2 on my lookup table, or my table array as it's called. And because this is an approximate search, I'm going to leave the range lookup blank, or I could type in the word true. So I'm going to click OK. So, and again, I'm going to change that to a percentage just so we have the same, and then I'm going to use my fill handle to copy that down. So you can see that they're exactly the same. The nested if statement has returned the same value as the VLOOKUP. Okay, so that's basically a nested if statement, is an if statement that's nested inside an if statement. Now we're going to do the same thing, we're going to do a different calculation, but again we're trying to test for more than one value in my logical test. And again, go back to my simple if statement. In my simple if statement, the logical test is what I'm testing, and if it's true I'm going to go here, and if it's false I'm going to go here. The important thing here is that for an if statement to work, the logical test must evaluate to either true or false. So internally what Excel is doing is when it does that logical test, it says, is D2 greater than or equal to 3? And if the answer is yes, then it'll simply return the word true to the function. And if it's wrong, it'll return the word false to the function. And then based on whether it's true or false, it'll do value of true, value of false. So the reason that so if you want to test more than one thing, so in this particular case we're going to say if the service is greater than or equal to 5 and the rating is greater than or equal to 3, then we're going to give them a, we'll say a 20% bonus. All right. So in this case, both logical tests must be true. They must have a service that's greater than or equal to 5 and a rating that's greater than or equal to 3. So I can't use a simple if statement because I could only test service, or I could test for rating, but I can't test for both. So in this circumstance, what we are going to do is we are going to use an AND function as our logical test. So I'm going to go back to formulas. I'm going to go to if. So my logical test is going to be the AND function. So I'm going to type AND bracket. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to be testing for service is greater than or equal to 5, comma, rating is greater than or equal to 3, comma. Okay, so notice that on the function on the dialog box it shows equals true. So that AND function, because the AND function and the OR function simply return the value true or false depending on what you're testing. So the AND function, both the arguments, so in this case that AND function has two arguments. F2 is greater than or equal to 5, so service is greater than or equal to 5, and D2 is greater than or equal to 3, so rating is greater than or equal to 3. So if that's true, I think I said we're going to give them a 25% bonus, and if it's false, we're going to give them a, let's say, a 10% bonus. Alright, so I'll click OK. Again, I'm going to go here, I'm going to format that as a percentage, and I'll copy it down. So this person got a 25% bonus because their rating was greater than or equal to 3, and their service was greater than 5, or greater than or equal to 5. This person, even though the service was greater than or equal to 8, his rating was only a 1, so he got a 10% bonus. This person was 3 with 6 years of service, so he got a 25% bonus. This person was a rating of 2 with 12 years of service, so he got a 10% bonus. Okay, so that's using the AND function as your logical test in an if statement. Now let's take a look at an OR function. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to say if we're going to give them a 15% bonus if what did I say? Did you put it in the comments? No. So this one here, we're going to give them a 15% bonus if the service is greater than or equal to 5, or their rating is greater than or equal to 3. So only one of those logical tests has to be true. I can't use a simple single if statement, because if I did, I could only test service or rating. but in this case I'm going to test for both. So I'm going to go to formulas, if, and again I could be typing in my function if I wanted to. My logical test is going to be or, and I'm testing to see if service is greater than or equal to 5, which is true, and rating is or rating is greater than or equal to 3. Okay, now in this case they're both true. All right, and if that was true, we're going to give them a 15% bonus. Otherwise, we're going to give them a 10% bonus. Click OK. Again, I will format that as a percentage, and I will copy it down. So let me see here. Oh, in this case, everybody got a 15% bonus. All right, because everybody's either their service was greater than or that. So let's just find somebody with service of less than 5 years. Well, that's why. There's one here. So here's a person with 4 years, less than 5 years. We're going to change their bonus to 2. And so in this particular circumstance, Laurel, whatever, because her service was, her rating was a 2 and her service was less than 5. So in that circumstance, oh, it's not going to work. I'm in the wrong spot. So you can see here that what we're testing for is F20 is greater than or equal to 5. Okay, so their service is greater than or equal to 5, or their rating was greater than or equal to 3. But in this case, neither of those were true, so it returned the word false. So then we got the 10% bonus. Okay, that's basically it. So this is just a quick thing. And again, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email your professor. Thanks. Bye.